Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Jonathan,
Slava.
a fine evening to you.
The crooked warden bless you.
May he guide your steps.
May he guide your fingers to full coin purses.
Yes.
So we're back again. Act 2, The Lies of Locke Lamora. And I want you to let the audience know, do you have the same complaint that Spencer sent me about the book being too slow?
No, and I think that qualifies Spencer to get kicked off the podcast. Quite honestly. I am insulted, and I shall have my revenge.
Well, you do like your revenge stories. It's interesting that you say you're insulted because Spencer and I were both insulted when you said that The Lies of Locke Lamora is better than The Way of Kings.
I'm not going to make an objective claim, but I certainly liked it better. I read The Way of Kings, and I enjoyed it, but I read it for our project. I stand by what I said about it during the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But this book, by far, blew it out of the water for me because I could not put this down.
Right, that's true.
I could take a break from Way of Kings, and I did take breaks from Way of Kings when we got ahead. And then I read other stuff, some of it for the podcast to get ahead for other episodes or to refresh myself for the books that we were going to be covering afterwards, or just for grins because I wanted to read something else. But I took a break from The Way of Kings. I did not take a break from The Lies of Locke Lamora.
Mm-hmm. See, and I knew that you'd love this book. And so on the front end, I was trying to plan with Slava, like, hey, can we bump these episodes up because we want to have Spencer on again as our guest episode. But, this book is very well laid out in a 4-act structure. And so that leads into 4 episodes plus a guest episode, and was trying to explain to him via text, like, hey, let's do a few early episode recordings. Make sure we can get Spencer on before he starts his career training thing that he's going to do for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
And Slava gave kickback. He's like, well, I mean, do we need a guest episode? And this was it when he was in Act 1. This is before he understood how much he was going to love it. And I was like, why don't you keep reading the book a little bit and then we'll work out the details here. And then one day he's like, yeah, I'm in the middle of Act 2, which was when we recorded the first episode. And then 3 days later he finished the book. And I was like, well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, you could say that I pissed myself happy reading the second half of Act 2.
Yeah, that's what you want to commit to here? That's the phrase?
Last week, the shtick was the horse urine, so I figured I'd pigtail it, dovetail it, whatever.
Always with the tails with you.
Horsetail.
Mm-hmm.
Horsetail it.
Anyway, you know what time it is, you salty adventurers. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a side quest, because otherwise you'll miss out on all of the great books that I recommend to Slava. Today on Side Quest.
I thought for sure you were going to call the audience bastards. You unruly bastards. Hit that subscribe
You
button.
gentlemen bastards.
Hey, we got a couple of ladies in the audience.
Look.
The metrics tells us so. Metrics don't lie.
Sabbatha is part of the gentlemen bastards.
Fair.
Right. Let's do a quick recap, Slava, of some of your favorite quotes from Act 1 before we move into Act 2. How about that?
So I wrote some down, and one of them that I thought was really interesting, kind of sets the tone for, was by the Thief Maker. And in the prologue, he says, I've got kids that enjoy stealing. I've got kids that don't think about stealing one way or another. And I've got kids that just tolerate stealing because they know they've got nothing else to do. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever been hungry for it like this boy, meaning Locke. If he had a bloody gash across his throat and a physician was trying to sew it up, Lamora would steal the needle and thread and die laughing. He steals too much. So this statement, it's almost like a thesis statement on Locke Lamora, right? At approximately, 6, 7, he's here?
Yeah.
This is the first character sketch we get of Locke, and we see in the rest of the book how much Locke really likes his gig. He is committed. Life for most Camori citizens is violent and gory, and you either make it or don't. And I think Locke is one of those people that, yeah, he enjoys it. It's a necessity, and he enjoys it. Let me put it that way.
What do you think about the fact that like this is a pretty unique character, right? Like, okay, it's a heist book. Okay, he's a thief, and then like Lynch is like, what if he's like on a scale of 1 to 10, he's a 25. Like he's just too good at it. Locke steals so much that he breaks all of the underwritten rules that the guards have with the thief maker, that the thief maker has with the nobility, that the nobility have with the thieves. Like the secret piece, Locke's like, nah, I'm just gonna steal. Completely. Always and forever, his hands are moving, or the next heist is rolling.
Yeah, and he walks into each one without much of a plan.
No.
Now, some of the stuff he plans out
Yeah.
very much in detail. He's 10 steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Some stuff he walks into just all. Let's get this done, right? Flip side of that coin, and I think we'll get into it a little bit later, the flip side of that coin is he's still unassuming, or presents himself as unassuming very
Yes.
well. So
Yes.
one of the many lies of Locke Lamora. And that's something that Father Chains taught them. Chains used to claim that there is no freedom quite like the freedom of being constantly underestimated. And I think he taught the bastards well.
Yeah, he did.
They certainly are underestimated.
Yes. One of my quotes from the Lies of Locke Lamora that I like is when they're all getting together to have dinner. It goes something like this. I think I'm missing some spots, but it's perfect. Locke would appreciate it. Bug, Kahlo said, Locke is our brother, and our love for him knows no bounds. But the 4 most fatal words in the Theron language are Locke would appreciate it. Rivaled only by Locke taught me a new trick, added Gallo. The only person who gets away with Locke Lamora games is Locke, because we think the gods are saving him up for a really big death.
Yeah.
Something with knives and hot irons, and 50,000 cheering spectators.
I like it. I really like it.
Even the people that he is closest to know that there's something unique and special about Locke, and that speaks to something. And I think it'd be crazy if this was like a foreshadowing for somewhere in book 7 where Locke finally gets his comeuppance, or almost gets his comeuppance with knives and hot irons with 50,000 cheering spectators.
I'd read that book.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, 100%. Another one that I like is I just love Father Chains. To me, feels like Orthos. If Orthos wasn't a turtle and was instead
The thief?
a thief, yeah. He's like, when you don't know everything that you could know, it's a fine time to shut your fucking noisemaker and be polite. Oh, Chains.
Yeah, I like Chains a lot.
I really wish he was along for the ride longer.
But I think that's what makes a story interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you kill off a good character early,
Yeah.
I fear it'd be very cliche if Chains was on the other end of the world, and when Locke and John leave the city at the end of the book, they meet up with Chains, and they're like, oh, Father Chains, everything you've taught us, we've used it, and you were 100% right. That would be Barf City.
Mm-hmm. All right, give me another quote from the earlier parts of the book.
Such audacity could never be faked. Locke had to feel it, summon it from somewhere inside, cloak himself in arrogance as though it were an old familiar garment. Locke Lamora became a shadow in his own mind. He was a midnighter, an officer of the Duke's Island Constabulary. Locke's complicated lies were this new man's simple truth. What a good quote.
Locke's complicated lies were this new man's simple truth. Oh,
yeah.
It's such a great sentence.
Locke is lying, but he has this identity
mm-hmm.
that he takes on, and he folds lies upon lies upon lies for survival, and you guessed it, for thievery, and then, of course, last but not least, just for the thrill of it. And here we're told, in no uncertain terms, Locke must believe his own lies to make other people believe them too.
Yeah.
That's kind of part of the con. That's
100%.
a timeless truth, if you will, for this world and for these people, right? So the simile here, which I find fascinating, that compares his arrogance to an old familiar garment, which is a setup for, I think, what happens in book 2. But everything he used to create these lies and create these persona eventually get destroyed. But right now, in this part of the story, this is all very good and familiar and comforting for him in his mind. Right? This is the way it's supposed to be. This is what he has to do, not only to survive, but to also find that thrill.
Yeah. What do you think about the fact that I think it's the same scene where they are about to have dinner. They throw their winnings, if you can call them that, their bounty, into their 3 different piles of just absolute cash. And Chains never taught them to do something with it. He taught them to steal really well, but no sort of bigger plan.
I think Chains died before they could continue the training or their growth.
Yeah.
They know how to steal. They know how to get away with it. They steal really well. Their cons are pretty elaborate. They execute them well. And it's not necessarily that they don't know what to do with it, although that's kind of alluded to, but also, what are they going to do with it? They're, Chains is probably freshly gone, a couple of years, and they eat well, they dress well, they have fun, they spend exorbitant amounts of money on all sorts of things, whether it's to set up another con, whether it's to buy fancy clothes, whether it's to eat, whether it's to visit the brothel.
The Gilded Lilies?
Yeah, they spend the money, but are they spending it in a way that you would expect a thief of their caliber to? No. And that is probably because they don't know what to do with it. And at the end of the day, they don't need to do anything with it. They steal so much that even living a good life, they still have a exorbitant amount left over. They still have a surplus. They're not living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Well, in some ways they are, because they can't spend it the way that they'd want to.
Right. They can't spend a lot of it because they'll bring suspicions from Barsavi.
Yeah.
So
I read somewhere it was probably a Reddit or somebody equated like one piece of white iron is like $1,000, and they had 40,000 pieces, and it's like $70 million or something like that, or 700 million.
Yeah, I saw something like that too, yeah.
40,000 pieces of white iron. Yeah, it's like $70 million or something. Just like sitting in their temple in a secret spot, just chilling.
Well, aside from the stealing, all the money that was donated while Chains was alive. So this is not just them stealing and stealing well. There's just a surplus.
Well,
they've been sitting on.
People aren't donating that much to Paralandro.
No, I can't imagine it being a lot, but every little bit counts.
Yeah, but they're not. But here's the thing: you got to keep that money separate, because if someone comes to check out the Temple of Paralandro, you need to have some sort of coffers in the back of like, oh yes, this is what we've collected.
Yeah, I suppose so.
You got to keep up the ruse.
That makes sense.
I want to throw another quote that I liked here from Chains. There are only 3 people in life you can never fool: pawnbrokers, whores, and your mother. And since your mother's dead, I've taken her place. Hence, I'm bullshit proof.
It's a good one. I remember that one.
Now, talk to me about, you've got one more, it's not a quote necessarily, but just like you have a thought here on early Locke, right? Did you mention this already?
I kind of alluded to. That was kind of the thought that flowed from the quote from the Thief Maker, and then this kid, Locke, really loves stealing. So the thought is he doesn't disguise himself as Fairwhite, for example, now coming to present time within the story, because he must, for the reason we just mentioned, plenty of money, but because he thoroughly enjoys it.
Makes sense. I think it's interesting. It goes to your point earlier, too, of just like he has to believe his own lies. And that makes me think like when we believe our own lies in life, we tend to feel more confident because it's a grounding. I think grounding is just the best term for it, actually. I think we ground ourselves in like, this is a belief, this is a truth, lowercase t, in our lives about me, period. Whether that's, and usually it's a negative thing, right? Like, well, I have ADHD, I have this thing, I can't read well, I don't do math properly. And it's just like, we're so grounded in it. It doesn't mean that that isn't true, but it does mean that you are bolstering that fact, that thing about your life, and you believe it so strongly that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that if someone held a gun to your head, you would get over it, you'd grow out of that negative thing. But Locke uses it to his benefit, where he's like, no, I am Lucas Fairwhite. And he like becomes this person, which I think would be an interesting superpower if this like went to the next level of superpowers instead of just like really good acting.
He'd be an interesting X-Men. I'd imagine he'd be with Magneto's side.
Just because it has more entertainment.
Yeah. And quite honestly, I'll show my cards. I find Magneto's character more compelling than
Professor X.
Professor X.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Anyway, let's roll into Act 2 here. And you were so excited last episode, so why don't you give us a quick hasharoo of all of the wild highlights that you have from Act 2.
It's part of the ruse that the gentleman bastards have to play, and they like take a bunch of just tchotchkes and sell them at a pawn shop because they don't want Barsavi to know about the extent of their crime or the exorbitant amount of riches they have, right? And the fact that they regularly break the secret peace. Because, hey, if you have iron coins, or what are they called? Copper coins, white gold coins.
White iron.
Which means you are stealing from the rich. And that's a big no-no in Camor. People died, so that peace would be brokered. And Locke just wantonly, without abandon, breaks it on the daily.
All day, every day.
When they come out of the pawn shop giggling to themselves, being content what they've done, it's kind of a daily occurrence for Locke. He just constantly pushes the boundaries.
What boundaries?
Right. But at the same time, he's an enigma, right? We know so much about Locke. We can kind of read him like a book, but there's still a mystery to him. We don't know his real name. His origins are still clouded.
Questionable.
We don't know exactly where he came from, where the thief maker found him, by which road did he come across the thief maker. At that level, it's impossible to truly know him. And he also lies constantly.
That's true. I'll tell you, as someone who's read all 3 books a few times, you'll get some answers, but because we only have 3 books, you will not get nearly enough answers to satisfy. Frankly, it's almost like torture to get the question answers that we get throughout the next 2 books to know more about him, particularly end of book 3. So, yeah.
I'm okay with that. The only torture here is you, my poor brother, in podcasting, is you are tortured. I might want to know some things, but I think he's an interesting enough character as a mysterious thief.
No. This is not like, oh, we don't know enough about him. It's like, no, you either have a wild red herring that connects with book 1, or you have the truth, which might be scarier. But the thing is, you don't have any validation on that. And so that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking like, oh, I want to know more about this character. No, you're given information that you have no idea if it's true or it's not true, because it's told by a specific entity, and it leaves you with like, is that person telling the truth? They don't really have a reason to lie. Why are they telling the truth? What? And then you're like, where's the next book?
Okay.
This isn't a cliffhanger in the sense of what you're talking about.
I still say I would be okay with that now.
Well, we'll find out, because you're like, what, halfway through book 2 right now?
Almost.
Jerk.
I'm going to say I'm okay with that, because 9 out of 10 times I'm okay with that. But we'll see if this is going to be that 1 out of 10 time. We'll see when we get to this point in the book.
As I have predicted that you would love this book, you will get to that part, and then you'll go, well, this is bullshit.
All right. Well, if I text you from an iPhone that has a cracked screen, that's because I got to that part and threw my phone across the room.
Right. Anyway, sorry, that's just a teaser about books 2 and 3. Let's get back to Act 2 because we haven't even gotten that far, so that's on me. Locke himself is an enigma, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
What little we know of him, he's consistent. He's cocky, he's arrogant, he does crazy things for no reason other than to prove that he can. He's pretty audacious.
Mm-hmm.
He can definitely be a little petulant and, maybe moody, if he can be both at the same time.
Oh, 100%.
Which you can.
Yeah. He's super moody.
And then he sees himself a class apart from everybody else. Even though he loves his gentleman bastards, he never treats them this way. But you can tell the rest of the people outside the temple,
mm-hmm.
they can all go pound salt if Locke has anything to say about it.
Yeah. So speaking about his consistency, there's something that he's really consistent about that even his brothers in arms are like, can you just get over this already?
Oh my gosh, yes. The unrequited love of...
Go visit the Gilded Lilies and just pound salt there.
Dude, like that was so annoying reading that. It's like, so you've bought a woman for the night. Now, we're going to forego any moral observations of...
It's a different world.
This is the Watsonian and the Doyleist thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the world. This is a Watsonian observation, not a Doyleist observation. So you've bought a girl. You've bought her time. Let's make it a little bit more palatable. You bought her time. She seems to be into you beyond the money you're paying her. And you're like, but this girl across the way, across the white iron... Well, it's not white iron. Hold on, Yeah, the white iron sea, or the sea of brass, whatever the hell this girl is. She could be just down the coast. But he's pining and pining. And this is like he's a Achilles heel, I guess? Is this what it is?
Certainly one of them. Here's the thing, though. As much as it's cringy, this is a real emotion that people have.
Sure, yeah.
Look, it's part of my story. You were there. Names can be omitted for whatever, but like...
For legal purposes.
For legal purposes. I was a wounded soul with unrequited love for a person that I chased across the nation. I get it. It doesn't mean it's fun to be around, but I understand where he's coming from. And also the being around the friends where they're like, hey, just go find someone else. Now, in the real world, it looks a little different than, visiting the Gilded Lilies, but the premise is the same, right? You need to just go put the numbers in and go out and do things. Even in the world we live in, people are like, just go have a one-night stand. Get over it, right? Like, that's a common thing that people say and do.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a real emotion for Locke. This is this is an Achilles heel for him. This girl, whatever she's done, she could be the purest of maidens who happens to be a thief, or she could be a complete psychopath. Sounds like the latter, really.
You're not wrong.
And I understand the setup. I'm not even mad. I don't think it's cliche. I'm not poo-pooing the writing. But just as a natural reaction from a reader, like, oh my gosh.
Right.
You're sitting next to a girl who's, by all accounts, very pretty.
A redhead, his favorite type. We can just assume that she's bearing herself before the moon, if we can call it that.
Yes. There's moons in the world, yes. And me, I'm like, what is going on? Because I know Locke for the past 200 pages or whatever, right? No, a little bit more like 300 pages. But he's very confident, and he's very good at what he does, and he knows he's very good at what he does, and he does more than one thing well. It's not just picking pockets. You have to be patient and methodical to come up with the schemes that he comes up, the cons that he comes up. And yet here is this thing that is kind of has him a little, I don't want to say broken, but has him kind of wound up or, in a vulnerable place, and he is not himself.
It's his emotional ball and chain. Not just because it's a woman, but like,
no,
it's a thing that he can't get over.
It could be anything. Yeah, it happens to be a woman, and it happens to be unrequited love, and whatever. I'm not making any statement about that, but the fact that there's this one thing that Locke can't really handle, the way he can handle the Grey King, or walking into that tower and telling everybody then in the book, like, hey, this has been a trap. You all got to leave. You're all going to die.
Yeah.
Irrespective of the other stuff. When I saw that, I was like, oh, really? This is going to be the thing now?
Every protagonist needs to have some sort of thorn in their side.
Uh-huh. Thorn.
There you go.
Well played.
I was going to say Gildan is Lily, but I didn't feel like
that's sexual.
It's meant to be.
Yes. So, being the thorn of Camor, he has his own, which is apparently a redhead literally down the coast from him. Or wherever she ended up.
So wherever she is. We get to meet more of Sabbatha in book 2.
Okay.
So.
Is Locke going to turn into a blubbering idiot in front of her?
Depends.
And your definition of blubbering an idiot?
Yeah. We'll go with that.
Okay. All right. Mine are pretty standard definitions of both.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
So, what do you think about the plot? Let's talk about the plot for a minute, right? Like, the things that are going on is there's this mysterious character called the Grey King, and he's, like, coming to town, killing the Garistas of Kappa Barsave. What is going on here? Like, the ante is being upped, and Locke and the Gentleman Bastards are, for the most part, trying to keep out of it. But once they hear about the fact that the Grey King is slaughtering Garistas, they're kind of involved. Like, they pay tribute to Kappa Barsave. We see them going with the boat to go to the peddler to, like, turn in their tribute, if you will. And they hear about a guy who got his balls chopped off and drained of blood. And now Kappa Barsave is staying in a secret side of the town. Remind me what it's called again? The Raven's Reach or something like that?
Something like that.
So he's in hiding, and his daughter's there. And
wait, Barsave? No, Barsavi's on the floating grave.
No, that's not Barsave.
Yeah, the floating grave, this ship where he's hiding. With his daughter.
Sorry. Yeah, the floating grave. I was thinking of the boat. Yes, the floating grave. That's what it's called. So he's over there, locked himself in, not going out, and the Grey King hasn't made any demands yet.
But he also underestimates the Grey King throughout this whole ordeal.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point, he doesn't even think it's the Grey King. He thinks it's the Garistas killing off each other. That's why he's killing everybody, and that guy who got his balls cut off. Everybody who looked at him that night is getting their head bashed in and thrown into the water because he thinks one of them knows something or has done something. And even though the Grey King is mentioned, he's not the prime suspect. Barsave thinks his Garistas are somehow involved in this nonsense.
Right. But none of them are talking, and all of them have their memories wiped, basically.
Yeah, because of the Bonds Mage. Yeah, so Garistas are getting murdered, and Barsavi's going nuts.
And what does he command Locke to do for him?
To marry his daughter, which, hey, they seem to kind of like each other, and Nazca's a pretty badass chick. I think maybe she would, in the right circumstance, do this, whether it's for her father or because she has true feelings for Locke. But no girl wants a guy who's simping for somebody across the pond.
Can confirm, just from research that I've done.
Right, that blog that you read.
Yeah, no, the research, yeah, well, thanks.
Oh, the field research.
Yes, I'm a regular anthropologist.
There you go.
In the ways of love, or lack thereof.
Well, we all got our part to play in this story we call life.
Thanks? Question mark?
You know what I mean.
What part are you playing?
I don't know. I'm playing me.
Mm-hmm. So, did you see any part of this plot coming? Was it all a surprise?
Somewhere in the middle, leading a couple of notches towards, saw it coming. Because I called a lot of the stuff that happened. And if we work backwards, I called the Grey King betraying Locke. I called the death of the twins. And what else did I call? What else did I text you? I feel like I called something else. I called like 4 things, which is a lot in a book this short, even though it's not that short of a book.
Right.
But that didn't take away from my enjoyment in the slightest. Because when I figured out, I'm like, oh, the Grey King is going to betray Locke, I'm like, holy crap, that is awesome. That's a cool twist, right? Again, I want to underscore this. That did not take away from me enjoying the book at all. Still a good plot. Just because I can call it means nothing more than I've read a lot of books, and I'm an amateur, lazy writer that never does anything except think about writing.
Fair enough.
I have that little bit of whatever you call it, that little muscle that works. So I can think like a writer sometimes. And when I'm really into a story and I'm trying to dissect it, it's easy to call this kind of stuff, I think. As they go from Act 1 to Act 4, from prelude to epilogue,
that's for sure.
I know X is going to happen because what else is there supposed to happen?
Well, there's also only a limited number of options, right? Like, even though writing a book is super creative, at some juncture, you either keep your characters alive or you kill them. That's a dichotomy. I mean, you could handicap them. I guess that's a third option that happens to some characters in books that we've read.
So twins die, Bug dies, maybe Jean dies, maybe Locke is left all by himself. But you're right. There's only so many places you can go. But in a book such as this, meaning it's at 11, you start out at the dial being 11, me, as Slava, trying to analyze it, I'm thinking, well, what else is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
They don't all live. Some of the bastards are going to have to die.
Yep.
Act 2, when the Grey King proposes his bullshit, I knew somebody's going to die. I'm waiting for somebody's death. And what's a good ante? Well, death. Death is a good ante. The loss of freedom, having to go back into that tower for Locke in, Act 4. And then you have to consider this is not just for grins, right? Like Scott Lynch is telling a story. There are just some rules that have to be followed. There has to be character growth. There has to be some sort of progression of story that is not just insanity for 400 pages.
Right. Well, what do you think about the fact that he continues to do snippets of world building? And I'm thinking about Jean in particular, where, they get some really great training, but we have these like interludes where, okay, Jean and Locke in the past, and then Jean being sent to the special tower to learn how to fight, and then Jean going out and becoming a priest of Sagura?
The woman of the night or river or something.
Yeah, the woman of silence.
Yeah, there you go.
Mistress of silence, which is like the death god in this world, which is interesting because they worship the 13th god that a bunch of people don't believe in, but also know about. So it doesn't stop. Like, the world keeps being built.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just giving you like enough information at the right time, and then the thing happens, right? Instead of, giving you a download on the front end, he cuts it into snippets and vignettes and then distributes it throughout the story.
Yes. And a funny little side quest. So when I was about halfway through Act 1, I told you, man, I wish I could have more Locke. I'd read the whole book if it was just
Young Locke.
little Locke. Yep. Young Locke. And then in the middle of his Fairwhite con, it goes back to an interlude. And now we're going to talk about John in the garden. I was like, dude, there's so much going on. And then you're right. You go back into the interlude and you're like, wait. At least me, Slava. Wait. I want to know what Locke was doing. Then you get 2 seconds. Well, 2 seconds. Then you get 2 minutes into the interlude. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Now it sets up something else. It gives you a glimpse into why Locke is doing what he's doing, whether it's in the portion that the interlude interrupted or somewhere before that or even somewhere after that. As you get these snippets, vignettes, by the end of the book, you're like, oh, okay. Here's a full story of, the mysterious and conniving Locke Lamora and his brother Jean.
Yeah.
So, all that to say, plot's good, well executed. I think few writers can hit the ball out.
Can play with their balls.
Can play with their balls and get away with it.
I think few writers can get their balls chopped off and drained of
all their creative juices and still write a good book. No, I think few writers can do this well throughout the whole book. To keep the dial at 11 for, 400 pages? That's a talent. But let's talk about something else now. I think we got the plot covered really well. Another quote that I wrote, and we're going to come back to it at the end of the book when we cover Act 4, and this just shows you the bond that John and Locke have right away after their little misunderstanding they have when they meet each other.
They have a tussle. It's a tussle.
They have a tussle, but it is what it is. I'm going to call it a misunderstanding. Then they work it out pretty quickly. But the guy who's beating Locke up on the docks.
Yeah, when they were kids.
Locke goes completely psycho and ties himself to this kid. And the kid begins to lose his mind, starts almost kills Locke. And what I love, and he says, I don't have to fight you. I don't have to win. I just have to keep you here until Jean gets back.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a beautiful growth spurt for Locke as a character and for him and Jean as friends. Because oftentimes, as kids at least, and as boys, you do get in the tussle. You hate somebody and you fight it out with words or fists. Then you're the best of friends. Then you're inseparable throughout your whole life. Mm-hmm. I've known stories like that. I've had friends like that. I remember this Vietnamese kid. I hated his guts in 8th grade. For whatever reason, we just didn't get along. Because I was Locke, only if Locke was a nerd that got picked on every day. But I was Locke because we've covered my FU attitude in life.
Well, yeah.
And this kid was put together. He was calm and collected, oil and water. And we had words. We didn't throw hands. We had words. But afterwards, him and I and his 2 other friends, the 3 of us for the rest of the school year were inseparable. So this happens, whether it's Gentlemen Bastards or real life. I think Lynch captures this part of little boys' lives really well. And this continues throughout the story, right? And this is kind of like the paradigm that's set up, if you will. Maybe that's not the right word. But this is set up really well for their relationship.
Yeah.
Tesso. The guy's name is Tesso. I still forget his gang name, but Tesso is trying to beat him up. And I think it sets up the relationship in another way that I just said. Locke needs Jean. And even though Locke is a cocky bastard and he thinks he doesn't need anybody, without even knowing it, he already acquiesces to this idea, assents to this idea that he needs his Gentlemen Bastards because he does treat him like brothers even before his character growth. But Locke really needs Jean.
And Jean needs Locke because
Absolutely.
They couldn't do what they do without each other. And we see that in the early flashback when Jean is like first night there, second night there, and Locke gets sent to his room without dinner because Jean could figure out arithmetic and Locke was an idiot. He's still an idiot, but...
Yeah, he's still an idiot. But this is how friendships work, right? Even as children. Like, these 2 are a bonded pair, but friendship... We talked about this in a previous episode with Spencer on for Black Flame Part 3. Like, what makes a good friendship? And we mentioned that it's...
Oh, that was a good episode.
That was a very good episode. I mentioned, and you all agreed, so we're going to go with we mentioned. And here's what we came up with. The ability to be free, to be able to trust them and they trust you, to be able to establish trust, and a sense of loyalty. That you are truly bonded somehow. It doesn't have to be Jean and Locke, but there's some sense of loyalty that, hey, this is Jonathan. I owe him X because of what we've been through together and the way that normal people interact and the fact that there is more than just your normal relationship here. It's actually a friendship that's, decades old almost. Definitely over a decade.
Over a decade.
I owe him X, and it's okay for me to expect Y from him or X from him. So that's what we covered in Black Flame. And I think to add to it is to understand what we just covered just, a minute and 30 seconds ago, that they both need each other. To understand that, hey, it's okay that Jonathan is good at this and Slava is good at this. So axe fighting and, elaborate schemes for Locke and John, whatever those two things are for us, and even as specific as this podcast.
We went over a little bit of that when we did the 50th episode.
Indeed.
We did, hey, what are you... We did the reverse. What are you not good at? Let's give each other feedback.
Yeah.
So, but it kind of got into our strengths.
Right. But you are a better performer than I am.
Fair.
If I was ever an actor, I would play myself in every role. I could act. I could probably perform and do all the things that's necessary to play a scene, but I would be me in every single scene.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be Slava sad. I'd be Slava angry. I'd be Slava confused.
Kappa Barslava.
But because of my 8 years of seminary training, I can do research on an academic level, which helps bring in so much information that I will contest. It helps the podcast episodes be more full than just two guys yammering on about their feelings about a book, where we can actually take a point in the author's life, a point in the book as in, like, here's what the book is trying to say. Here's where the book stems from as far as what was in the author's head, or the themes that, 2 or 3 people who are smarter than us, who read books for a living and analyze them, have said. And then we dissect those things. So you bring the performance part of it, I bring the back-end research part of it. And that's what makes the thing interesting, in my opinion.
Slava's always looking at the back end. Trying to be bent over on the back end.
Yes. Don't do that. Just perform, and all will be okay.
I will give it my best performance.
Excellent.
All right. Well, let's land this plane, because we've got a couple more episodes here on the Lives of Locke Lamora as things continue to heat up, act after act. Scott Lynch does such a great job at turning up the heat for our companions, our gentlemen bastards, in each of the acts.
Sure. And one thing we didn't mention, and I really wanted to mention, and I was playing with it, and it was shtick in the first act, but I wanted to touch upon it. Nazca being brought back to her father in horse urine, that is just such a thing out of left field. The fact that Scott Lynch killed off Nazca, and the fact that he set up the Grey King to be this grand old douchebag with a psychopathic side to like no other. You want to get somebody's attention? Fine. Put a bolt through his daughter's face. Okay, that's sick in itself. But he poisons her and puts her in horse urine and gives her to Dad to get a reaction. And then, obviously, this is one of the things I didn't call.
There's no foreshadowing for it.
You can't call everything. Yeah, there's no foreshadowing for it. But, holy crap, man. Like, that was dark.
You said it yourself earlier, like, Lynch doesn't pull any punches. The streets of Camor are depraved. And so, let them eat cake, if you will. Let them be depraved.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I know I tried to set it up in the first episode as, haha, horse urine, but it was really dark. There was no cop-out. Not that killing somebody's daughter is a cop-out, but it felt right.
It's in character, and it's in world.
So let's leave it there. Perfect.
Performance.
Indeed.
All right, folks, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button so you never miss a podcast here on SideQuest.